from the UK.
Support this bill as well. Palofalava, Awhio mai. And it's just welcome to your parliament. It is lovely to have you here, to have our Samoan community so strongly represented here today, as you have been strongly represented right throughout this process, and it's your passion, it's your support that has got this bill to where it is. So thank you very, very much. I want also to place on record my thanks for my parliamentary colleagues in the Government Administration Select Committee, especially Tiano, for bringing this bill to the House. And I think when you started, you weren't quite sure it was going to get through, but both with the support of New Zealand First and ACT, it came through the first reading, and now National has said we're supporting it too. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this bill unanimously supported through the rest of its stages. So and congratulations for the way in which you've worked with us through that. Congratulations also, Rachel, for chairing us through the process, Rachel Boyack, and I think it's been a very good collegial process. And my observation is that the select committees that I've been involved with are good collegial processes. If any other select committees are less collegial, I'd encourage you to come and have a look at ours and just quietly watch them, and hopefully you might learn something from it. I also want to put on record my thanks to officials from multiple agencies, and there were multiple agencies involved. In fact, we had to bring in a couple of extra agencies when we started, because this bill looked like it was quite a simple bill at face value, but as we unpeeled the onion, it got more and more complicated. So it involved things like history, which was complex in itself, international agreements, and not just the view of the New Zealand government, but also the view of the Samoan government, which we repeatedly tried to uncover. It included past changes to a range of citizenship laws over the last century. Of course, the Privy Council ruling of 1982, various policy initiatives that have been taken. So it was a very, very complicated process. My biggest thanks, I think, is to the submitters. More than 25,000 people expressed their view on this bill. And you brought passion, you told us your stories, you told us your family stories, you told us the stories of the nation as well, and you told us that history. And there was a clear, strong feeling that an injustice was done in 1982. There were a range of views, it must be said, Mr. Speaker, as to what should be done to put it right. But I would say that this is the Parliament that's going to do that. This is the Parliament that's actually going to do something concrete there, because previous Parliaments actually in some cases declined to do anything about it. In other cases have made apologies. We've had a couple of apologies, but the question is what were those apologies followed up with? So this bill started off with the aim of giving citizenship to people born in Samoa between 1924 and 1948. And why that time? Well, that's all wrapped up in the history. And Tiano at the time reinforced that for us when we sought clarity about the extent of what this bill was about. The history, Mr. Speaker, is critical to this bill. New Zealand became the administrator of Western Samoa in 1914. We talk about colonialism sometimes in this House, but that was a really colonial approach of, if you like, a Western nation taking over the administration of another country. That was formally acknowledged in 1920 following the First World War. And it carried on through till Samoa became independent on the 1st of January 1962, so a very, very long time. And Mr. Speaker, we cannot look back on many aspects of New Zealand's administration with pride. The Honourable Barbara Edmonds has pointed out some of the terrible failings, and they come, I think, from an autocratic approach of we know best, we know what we should be doing, and the reality was that the New Zealand government and the New Zealand administration did not. So in 1918, as we've heard, New Zealand government's negligence effectively allowed influenza the influenza epidemic into Samoa, causing enormous loss of life. In 1929, as she's also said, the Black Saturday, police fired on a crowd of peaceful demonstrators, resulting in 11 deaths. And those are things that we should be very, very sorry for. Of course, later, this country also showed racist attitudes, and we had the trauma of the Dawn Raids. And Mr. Speaker, there have been apologies for both New Zealand's administration before 1962 and for the Dawn Raids. I'm going to change tack slightly. Until 1948, all New Zealanders were British citizens, and in 1948, New Zealand citizenship was established. And then I'm going to say, we talk about the 1982 Privy Council case, because that's what this is all wrapped around. And Ms. Lesser contended that at the time she was born, she was a British citizen and therefore became a New Zealand citizen as of right. And there was debate about that. Clearly the New Zealand government didn't think that was the case, but the Privy Council said yes. The Privy Council said yes. And that might have surprised, and I think Barbara Edmonds again has said that nobody at that time believed the Western Samoans were British citizens and therefore New Zealand citizens. And they didn't have an allegiance to the British Crown. And I think maybe they genuinely thought this was the case, but I think that they were wrong. Because if not British citizens, if not New Zealand citizens, if Western Samoa as it was then was not recognised as a country, then citizens of where? Citizens of where? And I think that today is about putting some of that right. So the government of that time passed, in the space of 2 months, the 1982 Citizenship Western Samoa Act. And that said that people born in Samoa between 1924 and 1948 were never citizens, as though the Privy Council had never made its ruling. And that is what this bill is about overturning. So I want to go through some of our deliberations, because the first part of those deliberations was, do we repeal the existing bill, get rid of it altogether, wipe it off the statute books, or do we amend it? And we had quite a discussion about that. The intent was still the same, but we decided in the end that we would amend it. And the reason for that was that while one side of the Act essentially said, no, never been citizens, the other side of the Act also said there's a different pathway, an easier pathway to citizenship, and we would have removed that at the same time had we repealed the Act. And that's why by majority we decided that we would keep the Act, but we would amend it to do what Tiano wanted us to do. I can remember as the Mayor of Wellington at the time, and one of the greatest things, the greatest joys, was having citizenship ceremonies and welcoming people as new New Zealanders. And I'd often ask people how long it was that they had been living in New Zealand. And people would say 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And the Samoans came through, might have been a year, might have been 2 years, because of that special pathway to citizenship. So that's a very important thing to have retained. And removing those would also, Mr. Speaker, have offended against the 1962 Treaty of Friendship. And New Zealand only has one Treaty of Friendship, and it's with Samoa. And so that's why by majority we decided to amend the original Act, still achieving what the bill was intended to do, but to retain those protections. We discussed the extent, the number, the time frame. 1924 to 48 was very, very clear, and there were some technicalities around that, but that bit is very, very clear. We had a discussion about the period between 1949 and the 31st of December 1961, in other words, before Samoa became an independent country, and there is a discussion that I think is a real one there. We discussed descendants and the open-ended nature of that. And I think it would be fair to say that there were concerns about New Zealand's capacity if the number were too large. There were also concerns about Samoa's capacity. And I know if you look back at history that there were concerns about losing a very, very large number, particularly of young people, from the population of Samoa. Mr. Speaker, the 1962 Treaty of Friendship requires New Zealand's government to consult with the Samoan government over immigration matters, and we have done so. We've reached out as a select committee on several occasions to ask for the Samoan government's view, and it was their view that this was a domestic matter for New Zealand. But I know from looking back in the history that there were concerns about depopulation at the time, so that was a real concern, and I suspect that was one that they maybe didn't want to say. So we spent, Mr. Speaker, a lot of time focusing on ensuring we had clarity over eligibility for citizenship, over the pathways to citizenship, over the process for applying for citizenship, and we wanted to make sure it was as easy and clear as possible, and it is not just done in the English language, but also in the Samoan language. We really, really wanted to make sure that was very, very clear. We considered how adoption would work. We considered a reduced charge for application. There was an argument about whether there should be any charge at all, but the feeling was that if there wasn't, that potentially, and the advice we had from officials was potentially that if there wasn't a charge, the immigration system could potentially have been overwhelmed, and that would, of course, disadvantage all other potential applicants.
Get more justice,
Mr. Speaker, just to finish off with, outside the scope of this bill, we also heard a lot of submissions about it often being difficult to move from Samoa to New Zealand for family reasons, just for a temporary visit, the visa issue. And so we have said outside of this bill to the government, please can you have a look at the visa process? Can we make it easier? Can we make it smoother? So we make it easier for people to come from Samoa for whatever purpose it might be in New Zealand for the short-term visit. So I hope that has progressed. So as the committee report says, Mr. Speaker, this bill does not provide redress for the history of injustice, but it is a concrete response, belated, important, but real, and I thank you all for your part in making this happen. I commend this bill to the House.
I'm glad Andy saved me from doing a lot of talking. His logic is correct, but there is another way to resolve this. Can we get more border agents and judges, please?
Yeah.
Can we spend a bit of money?
Yes.
Like, I don't think there should be any fee. In fact, I think this, again, like I said before, it should be nuked from outer space.
Yeah.